Hello everyone, Prince Dabslot here, and today I'm going to be talking about one of the best haunted house scenarios you could ever run for your Delta Green group, and that is music from our Darkened Room by Dennis Twiller for Delta Green RPG. Truly fantastic, really spooky, and I'm going to go through all the tips and tricks and handouts I used when I ran this. So some information on the scenario itself. This is a slow burn scenario. I've seen a lot of people saying on Reddit to run this as a one shot, whatever. I cannot recommend. I ran this with 2 agents and it took us probably about 12 hours and could have taken it longer if I didn't push it along harder. So this works best as a creeping scenario where you're going to investigate the house first, and the house isn't spooky, which I'll go into more details when we hit that section on the house. But again, 12 hours it took us, 2 agents, so with 3 or 4, I could see that taking even longer, even 4 or 5 sessions as needed. This is not a scenario to rush. Spooky haunted houses always work the best if it's slow, insidious, and creeping. So I'm just going to be running through this scenario in order as written in the book. That way, if you're following along at home with your book, it's super easy to see what I'm talking about. So we're going to first talk about the green box here. I love a good green box in a game. This is no exception. I think it's missing a little bit of the spooky stuff that green boxes usually have, but that's okay because it works for the scenario. But this is a very important green box to the story. Your agents cannot miss this. Very important. And most importantly as well, it contains the vital clue of this page. You should print out this page and give it to your players. I think you even increased the contrast a little bit so it appeared easier to read, but this is important. This lists off every single lead your agents will need to follow to get everything about the house that's going on, including all the furniture, tracking it down, everything they can do, all the past people in the house. This should be almost like a checklist your agents follow as they go through the scenario. So definitely don't skimp on handing them this handout of the notes. It is crucial. So definitely recommend doing that if you want your agents to not feel like they're bumbling around too much in the dark. While we're talking about green boxes, I'm going to point to another piece of media for Delta Green. This is the Arcint book, and this is fantastic. It contains artifacts and atrocities for Delta Green. This has some great stuff you can shove into your green box if you want, which I did. I included the knife. I actually included the Baugman's green box. I certainly take a few from every single scenario that has a green box and shove in some of these items because they're super cool. They have a great plot line that you can hook to them, and additionally, like with one of the knives, where it sucks up the blood of the people that it kills and eventually leads your agent, to go follow it and go explore, and leads to their death or destruction, to go meet an old god. So this is great stuff you can work into your home scenes as well. I love green boxes, and they are a way to feed a narrative thread from game to game. If you have items that you want to apply for the next few scenarios, do it. Your agent should always be looking forward to the next Delta Green scenario, or I should say your players should always be looking forward to the next Delta Green scenario and the home scenes in between, and putting in interesting artifacts like this that they can spend the time researching in their home scene or digging into a deeper mystery or figuring out whatever. That is where the core narrative thread of Delta Green lives in between scenarios. So I cannot recommend this book enough. I wish I started it earlier. And feel free to shove any of these that you think is not going to derail it too long into this scenario. Speaking on the green box as well, I would absolutely recommend having a handout of exactly what's inside the green box for your agents, because it's a lot for you to read off. Of course, if you just want to read it off and they are good note takers and they can write it down easy, but this also solves a lot where I just hand them a list and say, this is what is inside the green box. What do you want to do with it? Just save some reading from me and some time back and forth. So, speaking of some other handouts that I made for this campaign, is I made Isari's diary a physical handout. Like, I think I had a old journal where I physically had the pages in there, and I had them hidden behind the fact they're in Arabic. They had to go to a library and take some time and translate, which was a cool moment of research to do. And yeah, so I include that as a handout along with Donnelly's handwriting, and this goes on and on. So, but again, a good physical handout to have just so you're not reading it out. Kind of fits along with his notes. So I'll post both these in the Dropbox link. As an additional note on further research, because there's a lot of information in this section all about the various people that are still alive and the people that have died. So one thing to note, and this is just something running Delta Green I've learned that applies in general to a lot of Delta Green scenarios, and that is don't be afraid to third person this information, like I've mentioned before in other videos as well. Don't feel like you need to recreate conversation for conversation every single one of these NPCs and what they want to do and what they want to tell the players. Feel free to refer to them in third person and honestly directly read off the page and the clues that they're going to give your agents, and also allow your agents to respond in third person by saying, my agent Dallas is going to push this character into talking more about X, Y, and Z. So that's just something I've learned when I'm running investigation games. It helps cut down on the time spent, helps cut down on me stressing about how to impersonate their voice and spit it back out as needed. And I just think it fits the nature of the game really well, because there'll be times when your players don't, my player might not understand the whole process of doing an autopsy, but his agent does. And so he should just be able to say, my agent is going to perform the autopsy. I'm going to say, okay, you know these clues you get from it. Don't feel the need to have them talk exactly about how they're going to dissect the body and this and that, or as an I gotcha, as an, oh, you didn't say specifically you were asking for this one thing, so you're not going to get it. No, it's an investigation game. You know, maybe put it behind a skill roll or just looking for a flat skill percentage that they have. And of course, don't ignore the amount of time it's going to take them to do this. So make sure you know, hey, this is going to take you, 12 to 15 hours to trace back everything. And that's a real decision. And that's where the decisions in Delta Green come in, where, man, do I really want to spend all this time possibly risking exhaustion or taking my time away from the team to go find this information? Is this information even going to help us, or is it just going to reveal more horrors that I didn't actually need to finish the mission? So that's just something I would keep in mind. But I did like all this history of the house. I like all the NPCs hanging out here. So again, don't be afraid to third person it. Some good information here, but it is a lot for you to take in and retranslate back in your own words. Including the research on the house are these news archives that I mentioned, and it's a lot of information for you to read off as a handler. So what I did is someone on Reddit, which I will link to in the description, thank you, Short Artichoke, made these really neat newspaper handouts that I physically had, printed out and stapled together like real, newspaper handouts, that my agent sat down, they went through, they highlighted. So there's some really interesting stuff here, and it's a great way of delivering the information that makes your agents feel like real investigators, like your players are really picking the clues out from this huge stack. Now, word of warning, it will slow down your scenario. If they have to sit there and go through, it'll probably be like the end of a scenario because it's going to take them about an hour, I would say, just to go through and highlight and put all the clues together. Additionally, there's this really interesting thread throughout these newspaper articles I mentioned about artifacts found on old lands. I'm not entirely sure if that was on purpose or not, but I tied that to the ability to gain the Elder Sign ritual, which I'll expand more on the end when we talk about the ritual itself, because I have pros and cons for including the Elder Sign in this scenario and not. But I use that as the narrative thread, and I would definitely recommend having this versus you just reading it out. It was really cool to watch my agents go through with highlighters and note-taking and figure out exactly what's happening. I think it's a great way of delivering information. So thank you for giving away these props on Reddit. It was very helpful. Now that we're talking, before we get to the house proper, this is a great scenario to introduce the labyrinth. Now, this is another book for Delta Green that contains a ton of NPCs, factions, both good and bad for your agents, and some mishmash in between, of course, like in all good Delta Green content. A lot of it is morally gray. So I used Ranko, this other agent in this scenario. Cannot recommend it enough. Great insertion point. I believe it was one night when my agents were in their hotel rooms reading up on materials and investigating some of the green box stuff that he comes bang, 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 smacking on the door, kicks his way in, gun to his own head, says, you need to help me. Let's do this ritual right now. And that was a very natural segue to having your agents learn that, oh my goodness, there's rituals that can be cast. We can cast rituals. Is this bad? Is this good? So hugely helpful for breaking in the idea that there are rituals, and it was a good way to introduce the ritual spellcasting rules before it felt too clunky. But I'll cut to the actual Renko page and go on a little bit extra about that. Renko is an agent for the Russian equivalent of Delta Green, and great source of tension here. I would definitely recommend sticking him in this scenario. He gives it a little injection of life, the out-of-game stuff it needs, and like I said, this is the key to making your own Delta Green campaign. Delta Green campaigns are established scenario by gritty scenario. You, as the handler and the storyteller of the world, should be weaving in plot elements from scenario to scenario, or using the home scenes to kind of link them together as a group. I mean, there's nothing wrong with just doing boom, 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 scenario. But when you get into home scenes and you let your agents explore and breathe and stay on the case and study the unnatural, that's where this stuff like Labyrinth is perfect. Cannot recommend this book enough. Cannot recommend the Renko plotline enough. And given that he has the whole thread with the Elder Sign that he needs, I thought it was then appropriate to insert the Elder Sign into this scenario, which both good and bad. So I missed the great moment of the sacrifice in the end because my agents ended up finding the Elder Sign by a plot thread of the artifacts labeled in the ground, along with following up with one of the house's residents whose father taught her some great prayer that tied into the Elder Sign. And while I don't necessarily regret introducing the Elder Sign and removing the sacrifice ending, because my players were all aboard the sacrifice ending until the very 11th hour when they found out about the Elder Sign and how they could cast it and carve it into the axe, which isn't free and cost them some good POW insanity as well, and ran around the house destroying the mirrors with the Elder Sign. So cool ending, but I am sad I missed the sacrifice. And if you're just running this as, you know, either like a one-off or something, and you're not tying it into anything bigger, would definitely recommend just keeping the sacrifice ending. If I run this again, I will be keeping the sacrifice ending and removing the Elder Sign. However, given that tied into both Renko and the next scenario, Ladybug Fly Away Home that we did, I don't regret it, and I thought it worked out well. But just something to keep in mind that the real decision of this is that sacrifice ritual and not the Elder Sign. So I definitely regret a little bit of including it, and wish I would have seen the brutality of my agents having to sacrifice a willing participant, which they were prepared fully to sacrifice Renko to this house. So that is a great plot twist, and I think even though it ended well, I think it could end even better. With that sidetrack out of the way, back to the house itself. So I gave my players the map of the house when they went in to explore it because, you know, it's kind of a weirdly laid out house, but the actual exploring the house shouldn't be the part that freaks them out. You should make this place not spooky at first. I imagine they're probably going to go in during the day. They're going to be pretty tense. And of course, there's the event like the bird in the fireplace that you should include and stuff. But you really shouldn't include any supernatural stuff the first time they visit this place, because, you know, if you go into a house and it's immediately spooky, haunted, okay, cool, haunted house, we're going to deal with it. You know, if it has that creeping, lulling sense of security where this house isn't overtly haunted, nothing really spooky is occurring, what is going on, it also is a good opportunity for you to start worming the house into the agent's brains. You should definitely not make this spooky, and that way when it becomes spooky, when they visit at night, and it's like, wow, this place is fucked. So that's how you should run this, in my opinion. That's why it's a slow burn scenario. That's why you should plan multiple scenarios. You know, think of 12, 15 hours for players to sit down and go through this one, because they're going to want to visit the house again and again and again, and they're only going to get a few feet in before they get freaked out and run out. And it's kind of like spelunking this horrible cave. But again, shouldn't be spooky during the day. Should be very disarming, very normal. Expanding a little more on the house as well before we get into the individual hauntings and where to go, and that this is a toned piece. You know, take it slow down the way you describe things. I'm a fast talker. Slow down the speed of talking. Make your agents really feel every time they open up a closet door, not knowing something's going to be on the other side. Definitely would recommend running this scenario with less people than, you know, not even 5 people or more. I would definitely cut this down so you can have them feel isolated and alone in this house. Remember, the house is calling out to them, might even mimic voices. You need to separate them and make them feel spooked and unnerved. It may feel like you're doing a lot of flipping back and forth, and I would recommend tabulating your book, as in with, you know, different locations, so it's easy to flick back and forth in between. And I'll go into more detail later about what to do with certain haunts as far as willpower costs and stuff. But definitely just don't worry about this one. It's gonna be spooky. If you've got spooky music, play it. I'll drop my playlist in the description. I really like a lot of the ambient drone of swans. Does a great job of really that hair raising haunted house spooky aspect. And you got Moonlight Sinatra get ready to play. This is one to take your time curating the atmosphere, as they should sweat every single time they go into a room. And what also helped me when I was flipping from page to page, finding where stuff went, is I had this map printed on the table, and I had the agents use cubes to show what room they were in. Not like a battle map, but just a great way for me to keep track of where they were. Basically, versus them reminding me again and again, I could just look down at this piece of paper that I had to show exactly what room they were in and exactly what page I needed to go to. So another thing to keep in mind when running the scenario is this house has very specific rules for how it works and how it takes over people. So something to keep in mind is these are tools. You do not have to use this if you don't want to. You're allowed to just say, oh, the house takes you over, whatever. You shouldn't feel too guilty about it. I rolled and had them do contested power contests, which I thought was actually a really fun idea, and I like that there's the mechanics there to play with. But if you find this overwhelming, you shouldn't feel the need to use it. But don't just take them over without anything. I do like the contested POW test. Maybe just not even keep track of like the POW in there. Regardless, like I said, it's up to you. It plays better than it reads. And it shouldn't apply to NPCs. When you're running NPCs, this is something I see a lot of, especially when I see people talk about like PX Poker Night, where you have a lot of NPCs like with sand losses and stuff. They always saying, oh, I have to roll so many dice. You don't have to roll. NPCs are there for you to use as tools. Keep that in mind for everything, no matter the system, Mothership, Delta Green, Morkborg, whatever. NPCs are tools for you to show your players a good time. Remember, balance is just simply an illusion that your players like to have. You're allowed to say whatever happens, happens. So, for example, I had the demonologist get taken over in the end, and it was actually attacking one of the agents' bonds that was dragged into the house, by getting lulled in there. So, and you shouldn't have to sit there and be like, oh, I'm gonna roll sand for the doctor. Oh, I'm gonna roll POW and see if the house takes him over. No, boom, the house just has him. So keep that in mind. It's tools. I did like this. It is a lot to track though. As soon as everyone loses any sand, everyone suffers any disorders, does whatever, and assumedly the house would be full after it just consumed the previous agent, who was dead, that kicked this whole thing off. And I would definitely make sure to use it sparingly as written. But yeah, don't be afraid to just start having it get taken over. And I even like the idea of it insidiously worming its way into an agent's brain and them being like, oh, well, house isn't bad. No, guys, we shouldn't light it on fire. We shouldn't destroy the house. So don't be afraid to slip them secret notes about something like that. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the hauntings of the house and how you should run this. I know it looks a little confusing from the start with the whole willpower 11 or lower and what willpower they're going to be at when these hauntings happen. The big thing to note is that they get spookier as they go on. And in fact, they're kind of broken up by plot lines and people that have lived in the house. For example, like the higher ones always kind of refer to a few specific people, and as they go lower, same applies. So the willpower rating here is just to more show that it gets spookier and spookier as it goes on, and the house is able to start to inflict more and more actual physical harm on the agents. So again, the willpower here should be a guideline. When they first enter the house, when they're first exploring, think of it, do the high willpower ones and just kind of have it be kind of benign, spooky stuff that's going to be occurring, nothing that's going to physically cause a ton of harm. But as it gets worse and worse, as they revisit the house, that's when you start jumping to the lower willpower ones, regardless if they have the lower willpower or not. Again, it's a guideline for you. But as they get lower and lower, it gets greater and greater danger. So again, when stuff, every room has like 3 levels. Definitely just do first exploration, second exploration, third exploration, and theoretically they should be knowing that it gets worse the closer as it gets to the specific time needed to summon Nyarlathotep. So definitely as they start coming in at night, right around the witching hour, the real haunting time, make it be the worst ones. And it's a great way of showing what happened to the previous residents of the house. So continuing on in the house, one specific haunt I changed, And wouldn't have changed this if I had more players, but the fact I only had 2 made me change this. It is the luck roll to grip that live wire in the garage. I turned it into an alertness roll, probably just because we had 2 players. I just wanted to keep it moving, but I like the idea of it being a luck roll anyway in retrospect. But with 2 players, I would say make it alertness, give your agent, a chance. And I like the idea of if they can become alert enough at the last second to realize that they're gripping this live wire. So just one specific change I made. The rest of these haunts are really, really fantastic as written. So not much you need to change. Keep them in there. There's some good, there's some evil, some mean shit in here. That should be mean. Yeah, your agent should get his throat carved out if he drags the knife over in front of the mirror, Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. So other than the live wire one, I kept them all exactly the same. Talking about how to win. What I think is funny, and my agents tried this until a neighbor came over and put it out as it says, is burning it down is kind of a fail state because they're going to burn it down and it's completely okay to say, oh, you burn it down, you stop the neighbor from freaking out and trying to put it out like they're possessed, whatever. And then you all go home, maybe even do a home scene, and then months later, you get a call that the house is being rebuilt in almost exactly the same state and continue from there. Because burning down a house does not win. And I love the idea that even if they do burn it down, they go home thinking they're so full of themselves, oh, we beat this house, it's nothing. Realize that until they, salt the earth or, really destroy it, really tear away this entity from the ground, there's nothing they can do. And that's a great source of helplessness of wow, this house is just a machine just churning through people through all of time. And this house will be here far longer than we will. So let's do something about it now. But definitely I like the idea that the neighbors come over and try their best to put it out. So definitely make it seem really weird. And it's a good point if you introduce the neighbors earlier to have them acting possessed and odd. So I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again real quick just for completion's sake. So the Elder Signs solution is a solution. It's not mentioned anywhere here in the text. I included it because I wanted it to tie into my overall campaign with Ranko and Ladybug and all that stuff. Again, I don't regret it, but the real meat of this scenario is them finding someone, dragging them in, and killing them. So I am sad I didn't get to see that. If I run it again, I'm not going to include the Elder Sign situation. I don't regret it, given that it tied into my whole campaign, and one of my agents really loved using the Elder Sign ritual at the cost of his life, limb, and sanity, and especially when something didn't work against the Elder Sign. That was a good, horrible moment. But you should definitely use the sacrifice ritual. So I know it says here to use the rules from the Handler's Guide, and they're pretty much the same. This is kind of just written in a little bit of a different format. But yeah, they have to expend 10 willpower, 3 permanent POW, plus the sacrifice. 3 permanent POW is a lot, and then, like normal spellcasting rules, you roll you roll your, I think in the Handler's Guide, you actually have a separate stat called the spellcasting rules, and that's just 99 minus your sanity, and here it just says a sand roll to activate it. So it's slightly different. If you're just doing this and don't really plan to have them do any other spells, just run this as written. Don't use the Handler's Guide. If you want to include more spells overall, definitely read the Handler's Guide and use the spellcasting rules. Like I said, basically the same. It just introduces a slightly different role of your spellcasting, and that's the same idea where if you fail it, you can either choose, actually if you fail the sand test, it activates the ritual, which is kind of what you want to do. If you pass the sand test, the ritual doesn't happen, or you can spend 1 permanent POW to make the ritual happen, still paying all other costs as well. So POW, spending permanent POW, like that sucks. That's going to mean you're going to hit your breaking point more and more going forward, so it is a real cost for them to spend. But like I said, if this is the only ritual you're planning to cast, definitely just don't sweat the Handler's Guide stuff. Just run it like this. So speaking on the Dismissal, I also wrote just like a chant that I would love to see them all like hold hands in real life around a bunch of candles, around a sacrifice person, and chant this thing. I left that up, Dark Man, hear our command. Just something kind of generic that I whipped up. So feel free to expand on this, but I'll put it in the Dropbox regardless, because I think the moment of having your agents hold hands, or, after sacrificing someone and turn your physical lights down low, maybe with some candles, and just have them chanting this again and again and again to have him never return when he shows up, gives them some spooky information about how they're going to die, or haha, very cool, you fooled me, sure. I think that'd be a great moment to have in your game, and that's kind of where this scenario lives. Given we're at the end of closing this one out, I'm going to touch briefly on the NPCs in this scenario. Demonologist, great character. Same with Tucker. This scenario has some really strong NPCs, and even the police commissioner and the coroner. So, like all good NPCs, again, these are tools. Whichever NPC your agents get the most attached to, which they like the most, fuck with them. Have them get dragged into the house. In the end, I had it be the demonologist was the one that went kind of insane from this house and was hiding in the closet, just then to appear out the last second and dive and attempt to attack the PCs. Again, these are great tools, along with the idea that you should be dragging in your agent's bonds. The house can mimic their voice if they're talking inside, which assumedly they're going to be doing. So the house was actually calling their bonds, called one of my PC's wives that had her show up, and she got attacked by the demonologist and then used as bait to get the agent inside the house. So, because this house is smart, this house is clever, it has perfect mimicry. Don't be afraid to hand your agents a note saying, hey, you need to call another agent and get them into this house, and they're not going to know what's going on, but it doesn't matter. They're going to follow your hand out, whatever you do with them. So do not be afraid to drag in bonds. My agents had that terrible moment of realization that, yeah, their loved ones, their family can get dragged into operations, and it led to some really awkward home scenes from that out, especially with that agent had been using that bond to offset the sand costs and reducing it anyway, and it led to these great home scene tensions that it just gave them a point to explore. So do not be afraid to have your agent's loved one and family and kids and pets and whatever get involved in these horrific things they're doing. That is the cost they are going to be paying by being involved with Delta Green. And that's music from a Darkened Room. Truly a great haunted house scenario. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Other handlers on the Discords and Reddit are super helpful for running this one. This was truly an unforgettable session and will be my favorite haunted house scenario probably until the end of time. So if you're nervous about running this, don't be. You got this. You are a great handler, and your agents are going to have a great and terrible time. So with that, I'm Prince Dabs a lot. Thanks for listening. I appreciate everyone watching these videos. I really enjoy making them, and thanks. Hope you have a great day.